The avoidant stands at the threshold of departure, convinced that walking away represents the ultimate expression of their strength and wisdom. They gather their resolve like armor, polish their reasons until they gleam with righteousness, and step into the void of separation with the confidence of someone who believes they have finally solved the impossible equation of human connection. How utterly wrong they are. What they fail to understand is that departure is not an ending but a beginning, the first movement in a symphony that will inevitably crescendo with their return. Their exit creates a vacuum in the fabric of their existence, a tear in reality that the universe will not permit to remain unhealed. They believe they are writing the final chapter of their story when they are merely turning to page 1 of a much longer tale. The avoidance psychology operates according to laws as immutable as gravity itself. They cannot simply choose to stop loving any more than they can choose to stop breathing. The attachment they flee from follows them into exile like a shadow at noon, impossible to outrun, growing longer with each step away from the light. Their departure does not eliminate connection. It transforms it into longing, regret, and the slow burning ache of incompleteness. Every day spent away builds pressure like steam in a sealed container. They tell themselves they are healing, growing, becoming stronger in solitude. But in truth, they are conducting an elaborate experiment in emotional deprivation. The results are always the same. The human heart cannot thrive in isolation from what it was designed to need. Their return is not a possibility, but a mathematical certainty, as predictable as the orbit of planets around their star. The only variable is time, how long they will torture themselves, fighting against forces they cannot defeat, how much unnecessary suffering they will endure before surrendering to the inevitable pull of what they abandoned. Chapter 1. The stones of attachment cannot be destroyed. The avoidant operates under the fundamental delusion that emotional bonds can be severed through sheer force of will, like snapping chains with bare hands. They approach departure with the methodical precision of someone dismantling a building, believing that if they remove enough supporting structures, the entire edifice of connection will simply collapse into manageable rubble. This reveals their profound misunderstanding of attachment's true nature. Attachment operates like the fundamental forces of physics, invisible, inescapable, woven into the very fabric of human consciousness. The avoidant might as well attempt to escape gravity by thinking their way out of its influence. Every bond they have formed exists not merely as memory or habit, but as neural pathways carved deep into their brain's architecture, as biochemical patterns that flood their system with recognition chemicals whenever triggered by familiar stimuli. Their departure strategy resembles someone trying to delete their own source code while the program is still running. They can modify surface behaviors, change external circumstances, even relocate to different continents, but the core programming remains untouched. The attachment system continues operating in the background, processing absence as temporary separation rather than permanent termination, constantly scanning for signals that might indicate the missing person's return. Watch how they attempt to logic their way out of emotional bonds, constructing elaborate philosophical frameworks to justify their exit. They build arguments like fortresses, each reason another wall between themselves and the pull they feel toward reconnection. "We are incompatible," they declare. "The timing is wrong," they insist. "I need to focus on myself," they announce, with the conviction of someone reciting a memorized script. Yet beneath each rationalization lurks the unspoken truth. They are running from their own capacity to love. The avoidant fails to recognize that their very ability to walk away requires the existence of something worth walking away from. Their dramatic departure only proves the depth of what they claim no longer matters. If the connection truly meant nothing, leaving would require no effort, generate no internal conflict, produce no elaborate justifications. The intensity of their flight measures the magnitude of what they are fleeing, not danger, but the terrifying possibility of genuine intimacy. Their attachment system, evolved over millions of years to ensure survival through connection, does not simply shut down because conscious mind has declared the relationship over. Like a lighthouse that continues broadcasting its signal long after ships have stopped sailing those waters, their emotional guidance system keeps searching for the familiar frequency of the person they left behind. Every new face gets scanned for matching features, every voice filtered for familiar tones, every touch measured against the phantom memory of hands they once knew intimately. The stones of attachment cannot be destroyed because they serve purposes far greater than the avoidant's temporary comfort. These bonds exist to ensure species survival, to facilitate the complex cooperation that allows human civilization to flourish, to provide the emotional nutrients that feed psychological growth. The avoidants' attempt to eliminate attachment is like trying to remove their need for oxygen, theoretically possible for brief periods, but ultimately fatal to their capacity for genuine life. Time reveals the futility of their efforts. Weeks pass, then months, and still the attachment system continues its patient vigil, waiting for the return of what was lost. The avoidant may succeed in avoiding external contact, but they cannot escape the internal reality of bonds that refuse to dissolve simply because they have been declared unwanted. Their departure becomes an endurance test, not of their strength, but of how long they can survive fighting against their own fundamental nature. Chapter 2. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. The avoidance psychology operates like a complex ecosystem where opposing forces maintain delicate equilibrium through constant tension and adjustment. Their fear and love exist in perfect opposition, creating a dynamic balance that makes both emotions more intense than either would be in isolation. When they choose departure, they do not eliminate this system. They merely tip it so far out of balance that the universe itself begins working to restore proper proportions. Their exit represents an extreme position on the spectrum of emotional distance, like stretching a rubber band to its breaking point. The farther they stretch away from connection, the greater the potential energy builds for eventual snapback. This is not metaphor, but psychological physics. The avoidant creates increasing pressure with every day spent in artificial separation from what their attachment system recognizes as essential for well-being. Observe how their departure disrupts every aspect of their internal equilibrium. During the relationship, their fear of intimacy was balanced by regular doses of actual intimacy. Their anxiety about abandonment offset by daily proof of their partner's presence. In exile, these balancing forces disappear, leaving their fear to grow unchecked, while their need for connection intensifies through deprivation. The system becomes increasingly unstable, like a gyroscope with one of its wheels removed. The avoidant mistakes temporary relief from relationship anxiety for permanent peace, not understanding that they have simply traded acute stress for chronic emptiness. Their psychological ecosystem requires both the predator of fear and the prey of love to maintain healthy function. Remove either element and the entire system begins to deteriorate. Distance eliminates the immediate threat of vulnerability, but it also eliminates the nutrients that feed emotional growth and psychological vitality. Their internal weather patterns become increasingly extreme without the moderating influence of regular connection. Emotional storms that were once brief and manageable during the relationship now develop into prolonged seasons of depression or manic attempts at artificial happiness. The avoidant discovers that isolation does not create the stability they sought, but amplifies every psychological tendency to dangerous extremes. The universal principle of balance operates independently of their conscious desires. Like water seeking its level or air pressure equalizing across barriers, the forces disrupted by their departure begin immediate work to restore equilibrium. Their loneliness grows in direct proportion to their separation. Their regret accumulates at compound interest rates. Their need for the specific connection they abandoned intensifies with each failed attempt to find substitutes. Watch how they unconsciously begin taking actions that move them back toward balance. They find themselves driving past familiar places, checking social media for traces of their former partner, engaging in activities that carry shared memories. These behaviors are not conscious choices but automatic responses of a system trying to restore proper function. Their attachment mechanisms begin asserting themselves with increasing frequency and intensity. The avoidant cannot maintain their extreme position indefinitely without experiencing psychological breakdown. Like holding their breath underwater, they can sustain the unnatural state temporarily, but eventually their survival systems override conscious will and force them to surface, gasping for the connection they convinced themselves they did not need. The question is not whether balance will be restored, but how much damage they will inflict on themselves before surrendering to the inevitable. Their return becomes not a choice, but a natural consequence of universal laws asserting themselves. The forces they disrupted through departure cannot remain permanently unbalanced any more than a boulder can remain suspended in midair indefinitely. Gravity always wins, and psychological gravity always pulls the avoidant back toward the connection that could complete their fractured equilibrium. Chapter 3. You could not live with your own failure. The avoidance exile transforms into a daily confrontation with the devastating truth of their own limitations. Each morning brings fresh evidence of the magnitude of their miscalculation. Every quiet evening echoes with the hollow sound of what they destroyed through cowardice disguised as wisdom. The failure was not in the relationship's inability to work. It was in their inability to remain present when presence required courage they could not summon. Their days become archaeological expeditions through the ruins of their decision, each memory excavated revealing another layer of what they sacrificed for the illusion of safety. They had convinced themselves that walking away demonstrated strength, but solitude strips away these comforting delusions with ruthless efficiency. What felt like decisive action in the heat of departure reveals itself under examination to be nothing more than elaborate capitulation to their most primitive fears. The weight of failure compounds with each passing day, like interest on unpaid debt. They begin to understand that they did not leave because staying was impossible, but because staying required a version of themselves they were too frightened to become. The relationship demanded growth, vulnerability, the terrifying prospect of being fully known, and they chose retreat over transformation. This recognition burns through their consciousness like acid through metal. Every attempt to create new meaning, new connections, new purposes serves only to highlight the irreplaceable nature of what they abandoned. New faces remind them of specific features they memorized and left behind. Fresh conversations lack the depth of understanding built through years of shared experience. Novel touches feel empty compared to the intimacy they rejected. These comparisons are not coincidental. They are inevitable consequences of trying to replace what cannot be replicated. The avoidant discovers that their failure extends beyond the specific relationship they destroyed. It permeates their entire understanding of what strength means, what love requires, what growth demands. They had mistaken the ability to walk away for power, but power without the wisdom to know when to stay is merely destruction, wearing the mask of decisiveness. True strength would have been remaining present while terrified, staying engaged despite uncertainty, choosing love despite the risks it represented. Their internal narrative begins to crumble under the relentless pressure of lived experience. The stories they told themselves about incompatibility, poor timing, the necessity of their choice, all prove inadequate when measured against the reality of their current existence. They constructed elaborate justifications for their departure, but justifications cannot fill the void where connection once resided, cannot provide the meaning that intimacy offered, cannot replace the sense of home they destroyed through their own actions. The failure becomes a constant companion, following them through every day like a shadow that grows longer as their exile extends. They carry this weight everywhere, to work, to social gatherings, to bed each night where silence reminds them of conversations they will never have, warmth they will never feel, understanding they threw away with both hands. The burden is not merely regret, but the crushing recognition of their own fundamental inadequacy when tested by real stakes. Their psychological ecosystem begins to collapse under the strain of maintaining defenses against truth so obvious that denial requires enormous ongoing energy. They must work increasingly hard to convince themselves that their choice was correct, that their solitude represents victory rather than surrender, that their independence is preference rather than punishment. The effort exhausts them, leaving less and less energy available for actually living rather than merely surviving. The consequences of their catastrophic judgment. Time becomes their cruelest teacher, revealing with mathematical precision how their failure was not a momentary lapse, but a systematic betrayal of their own deepest needs. Each day spent alone adds another data point proving that they chose poorly when choice mattered most, that their decision-making apparatus, when confronted with the highest stakes they had ever faced, proved utterly unreliable. This knowledge settles into their bones like winter cold, impossible to escape or ignore. Chapter 4. I am inevitable. The avoidance return operates according to psychological laws, as predictable as planetary motion, as certain as radioactive decay, as inevitable as entropy itself. Their departure may feel like an ending, but it represents merely the beginning of a process that will conclude with their surrender to forces they cannot defeat. The timeline varies, but the outcome remains constant across all possible scenarios. The pattern unfolds with mathematical precision observable to anyone who understands the fundamental forces at work. Phase 1, departure accompanied by relief and justified conviction that the right choice has been made. Phase 2, initial freedom generating temporary satisfaction with newfound independence. Phase 3, growing awareness of emptiness where connection once provided meaning. Phase 4, increasing frequency of thoughts about what was abandoned. Phase 5, active resistance to the pull toward return. Phase 6, inevitable capitulation to forces beyond conscious control. Their resistance resembles someone fighting against gravity, theoretically possible for brief periods but ultimately futile against forces embedded in the structure of reality itself. They may achieve temporary escape velocity, but they lack the energy required to break free completely from the gravitational field of their abandoned attachment. Their orbit may be elliptical, taking them far from the source of warmth, but the mathematics of connection will always curve their path back toward what they left behind. Watch how the universe deploys increasingly sophisticated methods to demonstrate the futility of their exile. External circumstances align with suspicious frequency to remind them of what they lost. A song carries memory like a guided missile to their defenses. A familiar location echoes with shared experience. A moment of beauty feels incomplete without someone to witness it beside them. These are not coincidences, but systematic interventions by forces that demand the restoration of disrupted balance. Their attempts to create substitute connections during this phase serve only to prove the irreplaceable nature of their original bond. Every new face becomes a comparison, highlighting unique qualities they took for granted. Every fresh conversation emphasizes the depth of understanding they walked away from. Every alternate relationship proves that some connections cannot be replicated, only resumed or forever mourned. The more they search for replacements, the more clearly they understand what they abandoned. The cosmic forces working against their exile grow stronger with time rather than weaker. Distance does not diminish attachment. It concentrates it, distills it into its purest form. Like matter approaching a black hole, their thoughts bend increasingly toward the gravitational center of their regret and longing. Eventually, even their strongest resistance cannot escape the pull of what they lost, combined with who they were when they possessed it. Their return will arrive disguised as choice, allowing their ego to maintain the fiction of control while surrendering to forces that were always beyond their ability to defeat. They will construct narratives about personal growth, about timing finally being right, about circumstances miraculously aligning, but these stories merely provide face-saving explanations for inevitable capitulation to psychological laws they never understood well enough to overcome. The moment approaches like a cosmic convergence that can be calculated with astronomical precision. The alignment of emptiness, regret, hope, and opportunity creates conditions that make resistance impossible. When that moment arrives, they will experience it as sudden realization or unexpected opportunity, but it represents the culmination of processes that began the instant they first walked away. Their return is inevitable, not because fate controls them, but because attachment operates according to laws that transcend individual will. Just as objects fall toward Earth regardless of their preference, just as time moves forward despite human wishes for reversal, just as entropy increases whether we approve or not, the avoidant will return because the fundamental forces of human connection brook no permanent defiance. The universe is patient, but it is also inexorable in its demands for the restoration of what serves its greater design. Chapter 5. The hardest choices require the strongest wills. The avoidant faces a cosmic examination that separates those who merely survive from those who transcend their fundamental limitations. The universe reserves its greatest tests for beings who possess the potential for the greatest growth, and the avoidant struggle represents one of these profound trials. Their internal war rages between forces so ancient and powerful that the outcome will determine not just their happiness, but their very capacity for authentic existence. The hardest choice confronting them is not whether to leave or return. Any coward can flee when fear overwhelms rational thought. The true test of will lies in choosing vulnerability over safety, selecting growth over comfort, embracing the terrifying beauty of being fully known despite every survival instinct, screaming warnings about the mortal danger of exposure. This choice requires strength that most beings cannot summon even when they understand what is at stake. Their consciousness becomes a battlefield where primal forces wage war for control of their destiny. On one side stands the ancient army of survival mechanisms, equipped with weapons forged in the evolutionary fires of threat-based existence: fear, suspicion, the overwhelming compulsion to protect the self at all costs. On the other side stands the newer force of connection, armed with hope, vulnerability, and the revolutionary understanding that true strength emerges through unity rather than isolation. The survival forces deploy sophisticated strategies to maintain control over their emotional territory. They manufacture evidence of betrayal where none exists, amplify minor disappointments into catastrophic failures, transform natural relationship challenges into proof that connection equals destruction. Their propaganda machine works tirelessly to convince the avoidant that isolation represents victory rather than surrender to their most primitive fears. Meanwhile, the connection forces gather strength from every moment of genuine intimacy the avoidant has ever experienced. They remind their host of the profound peace found in being truly understood, the exhilaration of complete acceptance, the sense of coming home that occurs when they allow themselves to be fully seen. These memories serve as their primary weapons against the fear-based narratives that dominate conscious thought processes. The war escalates when external pressures mount around the possibility of reconnection. Real or imagined threats to their emotional safety trigger massive mobilization on both sides. The survival forces call up reserves of past trauma, deploy battalions of worst-case scenarios, launch preemptive strikes designed to end the conflict through total withdrawal. The connection forces respond with desperate counterattacks of longing, regret, and the deep knowing that victory through isolation ultimately represents defeat of everything that makes existence meaningful. The avoidance departure represents the temporary triumph of their survival army, but Pyrrhic victories often prove more costly than outright defeat. Yes, they have secured their emotional territory from the perceived threat of intimacy, but at what devastating cost? The landscape lies barren, stripped of meaning, devoid of the very elements that made existence worth defending. They have won the battle by destroying what they fought to protect. The connection forces, though defeated, do not surrender their campaign. Instead, they employ guerrilla tactics, sudden ambushes of memory, surprise attacks of longing, the slow erosion of the victorious army's confidence through persistent questioning of their methods. Was this truly victory? They whisper during quiet moments. Was this worth the price that was paid? Their questions prove more devastating than any frontal assault could achieve. Time becomes the ultimate arbitrator in this internal conflict. The survival forces, designed for short-term crisis management, cannot sustain their high alert status indefinitely without depleting their resources. Their vigilance wavers, their justifications begin to ring hollow even to themselves. Their energy reserves diminish through the constant effort required to maintain artificial distance from what the deeper self recognizes as essential for well-being. The strongest will is not the one that successfully maintains isolation, but the one that chooses presence despite terror. When every fiber of being screams for retreat, when vulnerability feels indistinguishable from suicide, when opening the heart seems like standing naked before a firing squad, to choose connection in that moment requires strength that transcends ordinary human capacity and touches something approaching the heroic. Chapter 6. Destiny arrives all the same. The avoidant's fate unfolds according to patterns as predictable as astronomical events, as certain as the laws governing stellar formation and galactic drift. They may resist their destiny with every resource at their disposal, may construct elaborate defenses against the future they were always meant to embrace, But the cosmic forces that shape individual lives operate independently of personal preferences or carefully laid plans for permanent escape. Destiny cares nothing for their fears, their justifications, or their sophisticated strategies for avoiding the vulnerability that connection requires. Like the inevitable collapse of dying stars or the inexorable expansion of the universe itself, their path toward reconnection operates according to laws that transcend individual will. They may delay destiny's arrival, may fight against it with impressive determination, but the outcome remains fixed across all possible timelines. The universe encodes their return into the very structure of reality surrounding them. Every choice they make in exile, every moment of manufactured independence, every day spent convincing themselves that solitude serves them better than connection, all of these actions merely fulfill predetermined sequences that lead back to what they abandoned. Free will exists within destiny's framework, not outside it, allowing them the illusion of control while ensuring the inevitable conclusion. External circumstances begin aligning to support their eventual return with suspicious frequency and precision. The universe deploys synchronicities like tactical maneuvers, placing reminders of what they lost precisely when their defenses are weakest and their resistance most vulnerable to penetration, a song that carries the DNA of shared memory, a location that echoes with the resonance of past intimacy, a moment of beauty that feels fundamentally incomplete without someone specific to witness it beside them. Their attempts to create new meaning, forge different connections, develop alternative purposes, all serve destiny's ultimate goal by demonstrating the irreplaceable nature of what they walked away from. Every comparison highlights unique qualities they had taken for granted during the relationship. Every new interaction emphasizes the depth of understanding they abandoned. Every substitute bond proves that some connections cannot be replicated through effort or intention, only resumed or mourned forever. The timeline of return follows patterns as reliable as planetary orbits and just as resistant to acceleration through conscious intervention. Initial relief gives way to creeping emptiness according to predictable schedules. Emptiness transforms into active longing at measurable rates. Longing evolves into desperate searching for inadequate alternatives. Searching proves futile and converts to acceptance of irreplaceable loss. Acceptance births hope for redemption. Hope generates the courage required for return. This sequence cannot be rushed or avoided. It must complete its full cycle. Destiny operates through the gradual erosion of every reason they constructed for leaving, like water wearing away stone through patient persistence. Time reveals fatal flaws in their logic, exposes the fear beneath their noble justifications, demonstrates the bankruptcy of philosophies built on avoidance rather than engagement with life's fundamental challenges. One by one, their arguments against return crumble under the weight of lived experience in emotional exile. The moment of return approaches like a cosmic convergence visible to any observer who understands the forces involved in human attachment dynamics. Their resistance weakens according to measurable patterns documented across countless similar cases. Their longing intensifies on schedules as predictable as tidal movements. Their hope resurrects despite conscious attempts to suppress it through cynicism and artificial detachment. When destiny finally arrives, the avoidant will experience it as sudden realization, spontaneous decision, or unexpected opportunity presenting itself at exactly the right moment. In truth, their return represents the culmination of forces that have been building pressure since the moment they first walked away. Destiny does not announce itself with fanfare or dramatic revelation. It arrives wearing the comfortable mask of personal choice, allowing them to maintain dignity while fulfilling plans that were always larger than their individual resistance. Their story was always meant to include this return, this second opportunity, this chance to become who the universe intended them to be all along. The cosmic forces that govern human connection have invested too much in their evolution to permit permanent retreat into lesser versions of themselves, incomplete expressions of their potential for love and growth and authentic intimacy.